still remember the moment my dad looked me in the eye and said, "You won't show up." His voice was calm but heavy. I was 25 years old, brimming with dreams, ready to take on the world, and he delivered that sentence as though it was a verdict. It was the last thing I expected to hear from a man who had always encouraged me to chase my passions. In that instant, something inside me shifted. A quiet resolve settled in my chest, steady and unyielding. I decided right then that I would prove him wrong. It wouldn't be with angry words or grand declarations. It would happen in silence, quiet, purposeful, unstoppable. No ceremony, no audience, the sound of my heartbeat guiding each step toward a he couldn't ignore. I grew up in a small suburban town where my mother taught middle school, and my father ran a carpentry shop out back. We had a routine that felt safe and predictable: school, work, family dinner at 6. I always dreamed of something more, something bigger than our small cul-de-sac. When I turned 18, I moved to Chicago to attend university, and the city felt alive in a way I could have imagined. The skyscrapers loomed above me like witnesses, and the rhythm of the L train pulsed through my veins. Even the chilly winter winds carried promise. It was in that city that I discovered event planning, my calling. I learned to love transforming blank spaces into worlds of possibility, but I never lost the determination that spark grew from. After graduation, I landed a position at one of the city's top event planning firms. It was thrilling to coordinate galas and charity fundraisers, but I quickly realized how the industry could be. My ideas were often dismissed by senior planners who believed I lacked experience. I stayed late nights drafting floor plans, negotiating contracts with caterers, and sketching mood boards for hours until my eyes blurred. In the quiet glow of my desk lamp, I reminded myself why I loved this work. Every detail mattered. Every guest experience was an opportunity to craft a memory behind the scenes. I became a master of logistics, aligning timelines and troubleshooting problems before they spiraled out of control. Yet, despite my dedication, no one seemed to notice the extra mile I walked. I'd been saving for months to host my own showcase, a small public exhibition where I could present a personal project, combining design, lighting, and interactive installations. When I called home to share my plan, I thought my dad would understand how meaningful it was to me. Instead, his response was cold: "You won't show up." He couldn't see the logic. If I invested the time and money, how could I possibly not attend my own event? His words stung more than any critique I'd received at the office. I felt dismissed, as though my dedication was invisible to the person who mattered most. That night, I lay awake, quietly turning his sentence over and over in my mind, feeling both hurt and strangely energized by the doubt it carried. I decided the only way to prove him wrong was to take matters entirely into my own hands. I started researching venues late at night after work, scrolling through listings of lofts, galleries, and intimate theater spaces all across the city. I made endless calls under the guise of planning small events, avoiding any mention of my personal project. By the end of each call, I'd feel a spark of excitement, picturing each space unfolding perfectly with custom lighting and art pieces. I kept a detailed journal of room dimensions, rental fees, and availability, mapping out logistics in columns. Every detail mattered: parking, access for guests, nearby stops, the echo in the main hall. The process felt intoxicating. For the first time in months, I wasn't just dreaming, I was orchestrating. Money was tight, but I had been building a reserve from side gigs. I watched my budget, allocating funds for venue deposits, equipment rentals, and printing invitations. I talked to 2 friends who believed in me. Maya, a lighting technician, offered to handle wiring and color gels at cost. Alex, a musician, volunteered to collaborate on a soundscape for the space at a fraction of the rate. Their generosity fueled my confidence to cover the remaining balance. I negotiated a payment plan with the space manager, promising to settle all costs the week before the event. Every step was deliberate, every commitment locked in writing. In my apartment that week, I felt the weight of my ambition settle around me like a second skin, and possibility surged steadily within me. The moment of truth arrived when I signed the contract. I booked the entire venue in silence, paying the deposit with my own bank transfer one evening so no one would suspect a thing. The confirmation email glowed in my inbox like a secret badge of honor. I allowed myself a smile, imagining the walls filled with light and sound. As every detail I had labored over came together, I pictured my dad walking through those doors. Stunned by the magnitude of what I'd created, he wouldn't be able to say I didn't show up. I knew there would be obstacles, hiccups on the day of the event. But I felt ready. My silent plan was in motion, unstoppable now. On the morning of the event, I woke up before dawn with my heart racing. Sunlight hadn't yet crept over the horizon, and Chicago's skyline lay dormant beneath a pale lavender sky. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching my phone and scrolling, through the timeline I had created 2 weeks earlier. Every minute was accounted for. Load-in at 8, technical rehearsal at 10, doors opening at 6. My hands trembled slightly as I double-checked vendor contacts and emergency protocols. I reminded myself silently that I had orchestrated this entire day alone, and that every detail hinged on my precise planning. By 7:30, Maya arrived to set up the lighting rig. She walked through my design concept with practiced ease, hanging LED strips and gel filters that shifted the raw white walls into moody hues of amber and teal. As the bulbs crackled to life, I could almost taste the anticipation in the air. Alex followed shortly after, lugging equipment cases for the ambient soundscape he had composed specifically to guide guests. Through each installation, his soft smile as he greeted me was reassuring, but when he tried the first speaker, only static emerged. My pulse quickened, fear snapping back into focus. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the contingency plans I had written down long ago. Vendor phone numbers, backup cables, even a generator rental for worst-case scenarios. I dashed to the storage room in the back hallway and grabbed a coil of extra audio cables. By threading them through the cable management channels, I rerouted the wiring so that the speaker operated through the secondary input panel. Moments later, a rich tonal hum replaced the static. Relief washed over me like warm water, and I realized that these kinds of crises had become part of my personal proving ground. As the city outside roared to life, I slipped into the flow of final preparations. I arranged the modular furniture into conversational clusters for small group interactions, and draped translucent fabrics over industrial beams to soften the raw space. I printed small placards describing each installation, and placed them strategically beside the art pieces. My phone buzzed with last-minute RSVPs, and I updated the guest count on my spreadsheet. With each task, my confidence deepened, but a small knot of doubt lingered in my chest. What if attendance was sparse? What if my design failed to resonate? By midday, the venue's empty hall had transformed into a living, breathing organism. Cool breezes from the air conditioning interacted with warm spotlights, and the muted hum of HVAC mingled with the subtle drone of Alex's audio track, echoing softly through the space. I stood back and observed the symphony of color and sound coalescing around me. I thought of my dad's words echoing in my mind, "You won't show up." I felt a surge of pride knowing that I had shown up in every conceivable way in silence. I had built an experience that demanded attention. As afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, the first guests began to arrive. They moved in small groups, murmuring appreciatively as they encountered the interactive exhibits. I greeted each person at the entrance with a genuine smile, guiding them towards specific areas I thought would resonate with their interests. A gallery curator admired the lighting transitions. A marketing executive praised the thematic cohesion, and a local journalist snapped photographs eagerly. I walked among them quietly, absorbing their reactions like fuel. Every nod, every whispered exclamation, reinforced why I had taken this risk. My silent declaration of capability. Just as I was beginning to relax into the momentum, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my breath catch. It was a text from my mom. "Your dad's on his way." I froze for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. His approval was the one validation that had eluded me my entire life. I imagined him stepping through the doorway, scanning the room with skepticism before his jaw loosened in recognition. Would he understand how much this meant? Would he see that I had shown up in ways words could never capture? In that suspended second, time seemed to dilate. I smoothed the fabric on a display table, adjusted a stray cable, and caught my reflection in a polished steel column. The woman staring back wore a look of fierce determination tempered by a moment of vulnerability. I understood then that showing up wasn't just about presence. It was an accumulation of every choice I had made, every risk I had shouldered alone. Whether or not he praised me, I had already fulfilled my promise to myself. Silence had become my ally, louder than any announcement he might have expected. As the door handle clicked, signaling his arrival, a hush fell over the room. Conversations faded to murmurs and eyes turned toward the entrance. My pulse thundered in my ears as I planted myself near the threshold, determined to face him on my terms. The wooden door swung open, and there he stood, my dad bathed in the blend of colored light from the installations. His expression was inscrutable, a question hanging in the curve of his brow. In that moment, the silence stretched between us. Pregnant with everything I had fought to prove, he took a step forward, and I braced myself for what would come next. My future began now. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, my breath caught. My dad paused, shoulders stiff, as if bracing against the burst of color and sound that enveloped him. He looked at the amber-hued walls, the teal shadows dancing across exposed brick, the clusters of guests engaged in hushed conversation. For a heartbeat, he said nothing. I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a hollow ache that threatened to undo every piece of confidence I had woven over the past weeks. Then he exhaled a soft, almost inaudible sound and took another step forward. He wandered slowly, examining the interactive installations with careful scrutiny. He read each placard, nodded when a visitor asked a question, even reached out to touch the delicate fabric I had draped from the beams. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, my palms pressed against the cool steel column. My heartbeat thundered as though I were a student waiting for a final grade. Around me, guests smiled and murmured their appreciation. I sensed their gaze flicker between my dad's reaction and my own taut posture. I reminded myself to stand tall, to let the atmosphere I'd crafted speak on my behalf. When he finally turned to me, his eyes were soft. He studied my face as though seeking confirmation that this entire event was my creation. I cleared my throat, my voice catching in my chest. "Dad," I began, "I wanted you here." The words felt small, inadequate next to the scope of what I had built. His jaw shifted, and for a moment I thought I might see the pride I had yearned for shining behind his eyes. But instead, he pressed his lips together. "I'm impressed," he said quietly, as though admitting it were against his nature. "I didn't think you had the nerve to pull this off." His words struck me like an unexpected gift. I stepped closer, my knees trembling. "I did it," I whispered. "I showed up." He studied me for a long moment, then reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "I'm sorry I doubted you," he said, voice thick. My throat tightened as tears pricked my eyes. Years of second-guessing and unspoken expectations hung between us, and in that instant they seemed to dissolve in the charged air of the gallery. "Thank you for being here," I said, my voice steadier now. He nodded but said nothing more. Instead, he placed his hand on my shoulder and led me through the crowd, introducing me to his friends and neighbors who were visiting. I watched him beam with fatherly pride as he spoke of my work, and I realized that this moment wasn't just a triumph of logistics and creativity, it was a bridge I had built between us. After the event, only a handful of stragglers remained. Maya and Alex were packing up gear, and I gathered the last of the placards and brochures. My dad stood by the exit, hands in his pockets, watching us. He had come early, stayed through the applause, and now he was witnessing the teardown with respectful quiet. I approached him and offered to let him help fold the fabrics. He accepted, fumbling with the translucent material, but his clumsy movements made me laugh. "You're doing fine, Dad," I told him. "Thank you," he smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. "You're the one who taught me that fixing mistakes is part of the process," he said, echoing advice he used to share when I was younger and scraping my knees, or building a crooked birdhouse with him in the backyard. "Looks like you taught me something new tonight." His admission felt like the final piece of my silent declaration. I squeezed his shoulder, and for a moment we stood side by side in the mechanical hum of overhead lights, picking at fabric scraps and sipping from half-empty water bottles. The room smelled of paint, sawdust, and possibility. I wanted to tell him all the ways I had prepared for every contingency, how I'd mapped each floor plan circle on graph paper, how I'd negotiated vendor contracts in secret, how I'd rehearsed introducing the soundscape until it felt natural. But his steady presence beside me said he already understood. All that mattered now was the shared silence and the knowledge that I had shown up, not just for the event, but for our relationship. Over the next week, the buzz from the showcase rippled through the local art community. A magazine featured my work online, praising the cohesion of design and technology. A gallery director invited me to consult on a permanent exhibition. Even the firm where I worked reached out, asking me to lead their next high-profile event. I answered each inquiry with composure, scheduling meetings and drafting proposals. Yet despite the flurry of new opportunities, I found myself reflecting most often on the night my dad attended. The validation from respected professionals was meaningful, but it faltered in comparison to the quiet pride I'd seen in my father's eyes. I invited him to dinner at my apartment. We cooked together a ritual from my childhood when I was too young to manage more than a simple salad. Now we chopped vegetables side by side, the knives slicing in unison on the bamboo cutting board. Steam curled up from the stove as I plated the pasta I'd learned to make in culinary classes, and he poured us each a glass of wine. We ate slowly, savoring the flavors and the easy rhythm of conversation. I told him about the upcoming meetings, the potential exhibitions, and he listened intently, asking thoughtful questions I used to expect from my mentors rather than my own family. When I finished, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You went silent," he said, "but the results spoke volumes." I laughed. "Silence was part of the plan," he nodded. His face relaxed in a way it hadn't been before. "I promise I'll never underestimate you again," he said. My chest tightened with emotion, and I realized that proving myself to him had never been about the event. It had been about claiming my place in his eyes, one of respect and belief. In the gentle glow of my kitchen lights, I felt a connection, stronger than any exhibition I could design, that night. As I washed the dishes and stacked the plates, I reflected on what I had learned. Ambition without doubt can't fuel true growth. Challenge without skepticism holds no real victory. I had needed my father's disbelief as much as I needed my own determination to shape a story worth telling. Silence had been my catalyst, but the real power lay in showing up for myself and allowing someone I loved to witness it. As the last plate slid into the drying rack, a sense of calm settled over me. My path forward was illuminated not by grand gestures but by the quiet trust I had forged with the person who mattered most, and in that realization, I felt truly unstoppable.